And welcome everybody to today's live webinar, Introduction to Digital File Organization. Now this is part one of kind of a two-part series. So next week we're going to have Introduction to Digital File Storage. So we've done this class as one class before, but there's just so much info to cram into one, we've decided to break it into two. So my name is Rebecca Van Dusen, and I'm a library associate here at the Champaign Public Library. And if you've attended any tech workshops, you've probably seen me helping with those. I also will occasionally teach a class. I really like teaching a lot of the Apple classes, so you'll probably see me doing that. I also work at the information desk on the second floor, and then the small information desk on the first floor as well. So before I introduce Susan, our technology librarian, I'd like to mention that we are open to the public, and you can always come in and pick up your books, browse the shelves, get on a computer, study, or ask us questions. So you can either come up to the desk, you can call us on the phone, you can chat with us, and you can also email us. So our email is librarian@champaign.org. And the cool thing is you can also chat with us on the website. So if you visit our website, if you want to chat with us, we will answer on our side. And we are still continuing to offer curbside services. So if you want to pick up your holds that way, you can do that as well from our website. And we are still hosting our Book a Librarian service virtually. So if you need help with a one-on-one question, you can request a session by visiting champaign.org/bookalibrarian, and I'll put that in the chat as well. And then what happens when you fill out the form is that a staff member will give you a call and correspond with you, and then meet via a service like Zoom. Speaking of Zoom, let's go over some Zoom features. If you move your mouse near the bottom of your Zoom screen, you'll see some controls will pop up. And you'll also see, as I'm talking, the live transcripts are going. Now, there is a way to turn those transcripts off if you don't want to see them. You would just click on the live transcript button, which looks like a little square with two C's inside of it. So you would click that, and then you would have the option to turn them off or on if you want them on as well. And then you'll also see a chat bubble there where you can type in a question if you have a chat question, or you can also raise your hand. So we use the raise hand button as a way to speak your question rather than typing it. Some people have more lengthy questions that it's easier to speak rather than type. So feel free to use that. And of course, that's available anytime during the webinar. So if you have a question at any time, please let us know. Don't feel like you're interrupting. That's what we're here for. We definitely want to get to your questions and, not just have the whole class where it's just us talking. I think I pretty much covered everything, and we'll have this webinar available as a recording on YouTube after we've finished today. And you'll have access to it as well as the handout, which I will put in the chat right now. So the handout is going to be all the slides that Susan is covering today as a PDF file. So I'm putting that in the chat right now.
Great.
Okay, so you'll see a link in the chat.
And we also do send that out as a follow-up email too.
Yes. Okay, so I think without further ado, let me introduce our technology librarian, Susan Winkler. Hi, Susan.
Hi everyone. Thank you for joining us today. These are today and next Tuesday are two of my, well, I don't want to say I have a favorite workshop, but I do enjoy teaching file storage and organization classes. It's a do as I say, not as I do sometimes, as that old adage goes. I do try to follow my own suggestions and the suggestions of other professionals, which I will explain and share with you. But sometimes I'm like everyone else. Sometimes other things come up, and it takes a backseat to some other things too. But today we are covering file organization. I'm going to cover some major examples of ways to name files, and we're going to explore the File Explorer software management software that is for file and folder management on Windows 10 computers. Today's class is primarily Windows 10 computer based. If you do have Mac computers, feel free to ask questions in the chat about your Macs, and Rebecca can help answer those. And eventually, if it's worthwhile for everyone, feel free to give us feedback if you'd like to see a class like this that is geared toward Macs as well. Okay, With that said, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen where I can share the PowerPoint. So it's going to take just a second. It's going to get a little meta for everything here. And then I'll be able to share the PowerPoint here. All right, so hopefully everybody's seeing the Intro to Digital File Organization slide here. And
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right, so what we're going to cover today, we're going to go ahead and create and save some files, and we'll talk about the difference between save and save as, which is a big part of saving files to then organize and figure out where you're going to put them on your computer. And they are different, and we'll talk about what the difference is between the two of them. We'll create a folder, and we'll then rename files and folders. Sometimes you've named them one way, which I sometimes name things one way, and then decide that I'd rather have them be renamed if I use like a new classification system. So we'll rename them. And then we'll talk about naming conventions. There are some things, some symbols that are not allowed to be part of a naming convention for a file or folder on the computer. There's some symbols that you can't include, and we'll talk about what those are. And then we'll spend some time copying files and folders, so just to know that you can copy them. And we'll move them back and forth. Just to give you an idea, so this is kind of prep work for when we get to the digital organization class next week, because a lot of times what you want to do is when you're storing something or you're backing it up, you're really taking a copy and you're putting that copy on another storage form and another media form. So knowing how to move and copy is going to be really, really important as you start working through whatever organizational system you decide you want to use for your files. We're going to play with File Explorer, and we'll spend a lot of time with File Explorer today and a lot of time with it next week, because it is a very important way to think about your computer as being like a physical filing cabinet in your house, where you would store your folders and files. And File Explorer is one of the best ways to express that on the computer. We'll talk about File View, which is something within File Explorer that can sometimes help you navigate and see your files easily. Then we'll spend a little time with searching for our files and how to access them on the computer. If you're like me, sometimes you forget what you've called something. Hopefully, if you follow the organizational advice, that won't happen for you. But sometimes that still happens to me too. And when I remember a snippet of it, search can help you figure out what you've named that file and how to find it again. Okay. We will talk about the recycle bin. We have added that to this workshop since we split it into two. We can talk a little bit more about the recycle bin, how to utilize it, and what your files do when they're in there. And then we'll talk about a place where you can keep your frequently accessed files. So there are a couple of different schools of thought about where the best place to put them would be. And just like everything else, these are suggestions. So you can take it or leave it, or you can try them out and see what will work best for you. And then at the very end, along the same lines, we'll talk about some sort of best case scenario suggestions for organized files and what you might think to do to keep them organized in the future. And then we have a section at the end, like we usually do, for additional resources, some other schools of thought that are out there in the world for how to organize files on the computers. All right. Any questions about our agenda today? If not, we'll go ahead and get started. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to run through these first little slides and then do a live demo of what we're going to do here. And again, these are all in the handout, so you don't need to take notes unless you want, but you will all receive a copy of the handout that you can then follow along with if you want. So first thing we're going to do, we're going to just use Microsoft Word to create a file, and then we're going to save it. And we're going to talk about the differences between save and save as. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and log into I'm going to open Word 2016 on this computer that we're teaching on today. And then I'm going to go ahead and choose a blank document and put something in that document and then I'm going to go ahead and save it. Now, when you go to save it, you'd click on the File tab, and then you get the choice between Save and Save As. The major differences between Save and Save As is that Save As allows for renaming the file and creating a new version of it. Save basically saves over the file in the existing version. So what that essentially means is, if you think of, you have, say, a workshop that you're doing, you're making like a budget for it, right? So you have your budget and you've made your sheet with all your numbers on it. And then you've saved it to the computer. Then someone says, hey, I really like your budget sheet. Can you make a new one for the month of January? Well, you can go in and you can basically take the one you've already created and you can do a new Save As and then give it a new name and then change all the details you need. So, or if you think about a term paper and you're writing a term paper and you want to save your original version of your term paper, and then the draft, you want to save each draft. Save As is a good way to keep track of your drafts because you can save as draft 1, draft 2, final version, et cetera, et cetera. But if you just hit save, it writes over the top of the version you already had. So you lose those drafts and you just have the one file. Okay, so I'm hoping that makes sense. If that's not too clear, we can talk about it more and we'll put it in the, so if it's not, please let us know, pop in the chat and just say, okay, can you explain that again or give more detail on it? The other thing you get with Save As is you have the chance to determine where you're going to put the file right away. So when I do Save As, if you see here in our screenshot, I get the chance to save it to this PC or to browse for another location to save it. I'm going to save everything on the desktop today just for the sake of the ease of moving them and renaming them and things, but you could save it anywhere because that browse, go and look at, just again, like we had that filing cabinet at home, we could open each drawer and decide which drawer we want to put it in. Okay. All right, so then when we do Save As, like we just said, we can select where we're going to put it. So if I'm going to put it on the desktop, and then I'm going to name it, and you give it whatever name you want, and then you hit Save. Okay. The Save As type down here is just telling us what type of file it is, and we're going to cover that in more detail next week when we talk about storage as well. But we'll cover it a little bit today too. Okay. So Save As type just means what is the program that is going to be able to open and read that file. So for Microsoft Word document, it's going to save as a Word document. Word 2016 is what we're going to use to open it. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and demo this live and then we'll have a chance for questions. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is come down here. I'm hoping you can see that I'm going to search for Word 2016.
Yes,
got
we
the
can
app
see
up
you
here.
searching for it.
Great, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and open Word 2016. I'm going to pick a blank document. And I'm going to type in here, learning about computers is fun. Now, if you were in our in-person workshop, here would be your opportunity to say learning about computers is difficult, it's tricky, it's fun, it's interesting, it's worthwhile. You know, what we usually let you pick whatever adjective you want to use to describe learning about computers. What I'm going to do now is come up to File, and I'm just going to go ahead and use Save As. And this is just so we have some files and folders to play with for our examples. So I'm going to hit Save As, and then I'm going to go ahead and hit Browse. And now once I hit Browse, it brings up my Save As window where I can see all of the possible locations on the left-hand side here where I could possibly save this document. For today, I'm just going to go to the desktop. And if you were at our workshop last week, the desktop is primarily that section where it's the blue screen behind us. So it's where all of the icons live for your programs. And you can also save files and folders directly to the desktop if you want. So we're going to change this, and I'm going to label it. So if you see where it says file name down here, I'm going to change it. Word automatically makes it learning about computers is fun because that's what we've typed in it so far. But I'm going to go ahead and rename it Intro to File Org Practice 1. Okay, just as an example. Okay, we're gonna save it as a Word document, and then I'm gonna hit save. Okay, so now we've created that file, and I'm gonna hit the X up here to close out of Microsoft Word. And what we should see is that down here at the bottom, we now have intro to file org underscore practice 1 is now here on the desktop. So this is a file that's now living here on the desktop. Okay. All right. So if I did make a change to this, so if I open it back up here and I make a change, like let's say I add, this is a grade class, and now I wanted to save this, I could either go up to file and hit save. If I do that, everything's going to stay the same, except for the fact that now my document named intro to file org underscore practice 1 has an updated bit of text to it. If I wanted to do file save as, I can browse and put it in a different location and or give it a different name. So I'm going to call it updated practice.
Hey,
1.
Susan.
Yes.
Is there a way you can upgrade the size of the icons and the font that we're seeing on your screen? It's a little small.
Yeah, let me change my, oh, you know what? I don't think I did, was change my display size. So go ahead and ignore this just for a second, everybody. We're just gonna go ahead and make everything bigger so they're easier to see. So hopefully they're a little easier to see now. Did that help?
That looks better to me.
I can also zoom in if you're talking more like the text on the, from the Word document.
I think that looks good.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for mentioning that. Normally I increase the size of things before we start, but I did not do that today. So thank you for mentioning that. Okay, so now we have, I'm going to close out of this. Now we have 2 versions of this. We have intro to file org practice 1, and then our second version, which is the updated version. Okay, so that's the basic difference between save and save as. All right, questions? I'm going to give a moment for questions.
I don't see anything else. You are good.
Okay, perfect. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a folder that we could potentially put these 2 different files into. And for the sake of what we're doing right now, I'm just going to create a folder directly on the desktop. And the way I can do that, there's a shortcut where I can right click with my mouse and come down to new and folder. Okay, and that's going to create a new folder on the desktop that I then can put stuff in. So I'm going to call this Intro to File Organization 2021. Okay, and then I'm going to hit enter. Once I hit enter, that makes this folder and it's got its name. Everything's good to go. Now, if I wanted to move, so again, the reason we're doing this is so that everyone can know how to move files and folders independently of each other to various places on your computer that make sense for you for how you want to organize them. Okay, I can also rename it. And let's say I've decided that I want the date to be first instead of the name. So I can click on it and I can right click and I can come down and say rename down here at the bottom. I rename it. So it's going to turn blue with the highlighted text. And instead I can type 2021 Intro to File Organization like that. Okay, and then I can hit enter and that'll change the name of the folder. I can also do the same thing with my files over here the same way. I can right click on it and say rename, and I can do Intro to File Org Practice, and I could give it a date like 05/18/21, like that. Okay, so that's how to rename files or folders. The thing I want to mention about naming conventions here, and I'm going to jump back into the PowerPoint real quick so you can see this part about naming conventions. So here would be right clicking to create a new folder, and this will work when we're in File Explorer later as well, but we'll get to that in a minute. But I do want to show you some tips for naming conventions. Oops, sorry, I hit the wrong spot there. I wanted to do from current slide. One moment. Okay. Okay, so here are some tips for naming or renaming your files and folders. If you've ever tried to name something on your computer and it's popped up with a little message like this down here that says a file name can't contain any of the following characters, and it's a // // colon, asterisk, question mark, quotation mark, the greater than or less than symbols, and the bar symbol. This is because each of those actually means something different to a computer. So when the computer is reading this in computer language, these mean something different than what they would mean to us in our speaking language, right? And so for us, what we can do instead, rather where we have to avoid certain characters, oops, and here are some other ones here, you know, the @ symbol, the hashtag or number symbol, exclamation points. So what we can do instead is use underscores or dashes or a period to separate things out. So if you look here where it says 2020.09.20 cat photos, here's one case where I don't have dog photos, but with cat photos, this is one way you can do those dates so that you don't use the slashes, okay? Tips for naming in general, using a date can sometimes be a really easy way to distinguish different versions of your files and put them higher because numbers will come before letters if they're at the front, okay? We're avoiding the special characters. You do also want to consider your name length. So if your file name length is a lot of characters, like for example, this one over here, you know, this is a really long file name that would be hard to know that this is a file with structure that works, but you can see that you can add many characters, and then it keeps going. When you look at it on your desktop, this is the first photo here where it says cat photos just above that file. This is what you would mostly see if you hadn't tapped directly on that file. So you can see this is not so helpful where it just says this is a really ... okay? Because the computer can only show so much before it has to go to cutting it off. Okay, so do consider the length of your file. Okay, down here where we said, if you want it higher in the list, you can put numbers in front. That'll move it higher. So if you look at the really awesome cat photos and we put a 00 and a period in front of it, that will move it higher in the hierarchical list of files on your computer. Okay, so those are some naming conventions that you'll want to consider as you move forward in your plans for organizing your folders and files. Okay, and it works for folders as well as files to do that. All right, questions about naming conventions? I'll show you this in person here too. So for example, yes.
We do have a question.
Okay, sure.
And I should also throw out there about your file naming. I mean, it's your own system as well. So you're going to want to make something that sort of makes sense to you, right? Because you're going to want to be able to find where your stuff is.
Exactly. Yes.
So, you know, namings, I like to kind of use the metaphor when you talked about dates. I guess it's not really a metaphor, but I talk about like my resume. For instance, if I want to update my resume, I'll put the date that I last updated it. And then I'll have like older versions that I can see as well. But I like to have that date in there because when I'm searching for resumes, if I have like 5 resume files and I don't have a date attached, it would take me forever to go through and go, okay, what's the most recent one? But if I put the date on there, it's easier for me to find it. So that is helpful for finding, which is, I mean, that's part of organization.
Yes, and as Rebecca says, it is totally up to you if you want to use the suggestions we give you today. If you already have a system that works, you don't have to fix it. If it already works for you, it doesn't need fixing.
Let's get to the question though. We do have a question.
Okay.
Someone wants to, they say, can Susan show steps of how to make a folder again using the files?
Yes, absolutely. So the easiest way to create a new folder is to right click on your screen and make sure that when you're right clicking, you're not already on top of something else. So if I was on top of Microsoft Teams here, and you can see it kind of outlined in the square there, and I right click, I get a different list of options than if I click where there isn't something. So whenever you're creating something new, like a new folder, you want to make sure you're outside of where something already is. So come to your blank space and then go to new and then folder, and that'll create a new folder for you. If you don't type automatically at the start, and let's say you hit enter instead, that's totally okay. It just means it's automatically going to label it new folder. You can come over here, right click and say rename, and then give it a new name. Okay. And then hit enter again. Okay. Then you can also move these folders and files around in the open space on your desktop. So if I don't want this folder to be in this particular spot, I'd rather have it all the way over here in the corner, I can move it. And the way to move it is just to grab it with your left mouse button and make sure that it has that selection box around it, and then move it to the corner and let go. And that'll move it over there. And moving files from place to place, this is something I recommend everyone practice, because it's going to be important when you're moving files and folders. Either you're moving them back to a new location when you're coming up with a new system for your organization, or if you're going to drag something to another form of backup. Okay, so it's good to practice grabbing those folders and moving them to different places on your desktop. And the same thing is true for your files. It's good to grab them and move them as well, and keep playing with that. Okay.
And I mean, you could even create like a test file like we did, and then just kind of move it around and see, you know, create a folder. I mean, it's all about learning the mechanics of how to do it.
Yes, and I actually recommend that. I recommend creating some files and folders that you don't care about, that you can move and place different places and rename, and practice getting used to how that feels, both the muscle memory of it and the right clicking and everything else, and naming things. Okay. So something else you might want to do is to be able to copy a file or a folder. And this is something that you might do if, for example, we were like Rebecca said, her resume. If I was updating my resume and I wanted to create a new version of it that then I could go in and edit, what I might do is say, okay, here's where that original version of my resume lives. So let's say this is, in fact, let's change this to say resume. Oops, let me spell it right. So let's say this is our resume, and we want to update and have a new version of our resume. But we also, let's see, actually, I think I'm gonna use the budget example instead. So let's say this is budget, and let's make this our May budget. Okay, so this is now our May budget. If I want to make June's budget, I might say, all right, I'm gonna just copy May, because it's exactly the same for all the fields that I need. I just have to put in the new information where it needs to go. So instead of May's budget, I might copy May's budget. And what I just did was right click and say copy. And then I can paste. I'm going to right click and say paste. And it's going to paste a new version of that May budget here. Then I can go in, make all my changes. We say, you know, this is now June's budget, and then I can save it, close out of it. And now I'm going to want to change the name of this, right? So I'm going to rename it and make it June budget instead. Okay. So that's one other thing that can be helpful when you're organizing your files and folders. And sometimes you may have already done this where you've accidentally created a second copy of something. And when you create a copy of something, you will notice, and for me, this happens a lot with pictures. If I'm moving pictures from one place to another, I will sometimes accidentally make more than one copy of them. And when you do that, so if I'm going to make a copy here of May and paste it, and then I'm going to make another copy and paste it. And what you'll see is you start to see that the computer automatically registers, okay, I've got three versions that are the same of this file. So I've got copy, and now if you notice, it put copy and parentheses 2. So when you're going through for your organization, and this also comes up for your space on your computer, and possibly noticing if you have the same thing more than once, here is an idea of what you might see. You might see that it says May budget copy 2, and May budget copy, and May budget. Then you're going to want to look at them and say, well, May budget's already here. It looks exactly the same as copy, and it looks exactly the same as copy 2, and you can delete them. And so let me show you what I did there to delete them. Here's copy 1 and copy 2. To delete, I just selected the copy, right-clicked, and said delete. Right-click and delete. And that's going to delete them off of the desktop. Okay, we're going to talk about where they go in a few minutes. But I just wanted to show you, you can create copies of files, and sometimes that's very useful. Rebecca and I do this each month we make a monthly report here at the library. And since all the fields are exactly the same, what I do is I just go in and I say, all right, here's May's monthly report. And I hit copy and I create May monthly report copy. Then I go in, I open it up, I change everything for June, and then I relabel it June, and I rename the file June monthly report. Okay, that way it saves me time of having to basically like recreate it. It's almost using it as a template. Okay, questions about copying? No?
I don't see anything so far.
Okay, you can do the same thing with folders as well. So it's not just files that you can copy. You can also copy entire folders. So if I wanted to copy 2021 Intro to File Organization, same thing, I can right click, I can say copy, I can come over to an empty spot on my desktop and say paste. And then you'll notice it's just going to put the word copy underneath it. It's going to put that word copy underneath it when it's in the same location. So since these are both saved on the desktop, the computer automatically recognizes that there are two of the exact same thing on the computer. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and delete this one. So I right click and say delete. All right. Now, another thing that you may use a lot when you are doing organization is moving things, right? So if you were to physically organize your cabinet at home, your filing cabinet at home, you might open the drawer, physically take out a folder, set it aside, come back to it, look through it, move files around from there. Maybe you're going to put it in a different folder, or you're going to put that folder in a different drawer. Okay, so moving things is important, and knowing how to do that is important on the computer. So we're going to go ahead and move May budget and June budget into our 2021 Intro to File Organization folder. Okay, and the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to go ahead and select one of the files, and it's going to, again, it's going to get that bounding box around it. I'm going to hold down my left mouse button and start to drag it. Okay, so if you see what I'm doing here, I'm dragging it around on the screen. What I want to do is I want to drag it right on top of the folder that I want to put it in. Okay, so the trick to that is that you want to hold it until it selects it. So you see how when I'm hanging out here, the folder is not selected. It doesn't have the bounding box around it. But when I come up here, it does. So then I'm going to let go. And you'll see May budget has moved from over here into this folder. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing with June. I'm going to grab it and drag it and drop it into the 2021 Intro to File Organization folder. Okay. Now, if you want to check to make sure that those have gone where you wanted them to go and that they're both actually in that folder, you can double click on the folder. So tap, tap to open that folder. And then you can confirm that it says 2021 Intro to File Organization right here. And that the name, the date modified, the type, and the size, which we'll cover more next week. But you can see the name of each file here. So then you can confirm that they have gone into that correct folder where we wanted them. Okay, I'm going to pause here for any questions before we move on to the next section.
I don't see any questions so far. But,
okay.
You know, if anybody also wants to raise their hand, feel free to raise your hand as well.
Absolutely. I'm happy to take questions both verbally or by folks typing them into the chat. So now that we've created our folder here and we have our files in there, and I know we have the Intro to File Organization over here as well, these are pretty similar to each other. It might be a little beneficial to change the names of these two so they're not so similar. So I'm going to go ahead and rename this to 2021 budget since we've named them budgets. Okay. Okay. Now over here, my Intro to File Org updated practice 1, that I'm going to go ahead and put that in this Intro File Organization folder over here and drag it up there. Okay. What I'm doing now is known as, essentially what I call it is cleaning up your desktop. So if you move things into folders and you group them, it is a way to organize them a bit more so that your desktop doesn't have files and folders all over it. I like to make, for me personally, I like to make the statement that I have a photo of my cats as a background picture here on my desktop. So instead of this blue, I have a photo of my kitties. Now I like to files and folders all over the place on my desktop. I don't want them covering my cat faces. So I will move these folders, like I'm doing here, to various positions so that I can still see the faces of my cats. And that's something you might consider doing too when you do a cleanup and you kind of look at what you have on the desktop, what really needs to be there, what do you access a lot that you want to put there. And we're going to talk about that as part of our organizational method here in just a minute too. But just kind of consider where you want these things to be located. All right. Any more questions? Okay.
Yeah, I don't see any so far.
Perfect. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and move on to introducing File Explorer, which is the file folder and management piece that you can find on your Windows 10 computer. If you have an older version of Windows, it might also be called Windows Explorer. If you have a Mac, this equivalent to this is going to be Finder, essentially. And what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and locate File Explorer on the computer and kind of take a little tour of what File Explorer can do for us. So File Explorer is most likely already pinned, meaning stuck to your taskbar, which is down here at the bottom of your screen. And it looks like the little manila envelope here, or the manila folder. And if we tap, so if you see when we hover over it, meaning we haven't clicked, but we're just hovering over the top of the icon, it will pop up and tell you that it's File Explorer. Okay, so I'm hoping you can see, everybody can see that too. So I can either get to it this way, or I can also type here to search. Like we, for those of you who attended last week's class, we learned that we can type into the search box, and then it'll show us, if it's an app on our computer, it'll show us the best match. And that will open a new window for File Explorer. Okay, so we are now in File Explorer. You see up here at the top where my cursor arrow is, that it says File Explorer up here. And we're now in the file management, folder management for Windows 10. So a couple of things to point out. Much like a lot of our different programs, like Microsoft Word and Excel, they have a bunch of options up here at the top in something called a ribbon, which lets you do different things with your files and folders. That's what this section is right here. I'm hoping you can see my arrow moving, but basically up here at the top.
Yes, we can.
Okay, and we also have tabs. So we have a home tab, we have a share tab, and a view tab. And we're going to cover each of these in a little bit more detail once we're finished with this. We also have a file, and the file tab is a little different because it lets you do some fancy advanced stuff that we won't cover today, except for saying that there is a help menu here where you can get help to learn about File Explorer with that help menu. Okay, so most of the time we're going to be spending on the home tab and the view tab. So let's go ahead and start with home. So up here we've got our home ribbon. Here where we've got I'm going to go ahead and say we're going to cover the stuff on the left-hand side now. So we're going to jump down here for a second. We have what's known as the quick access menu. And you'll notice a couple of things are pinned, and you can literally see the icon, hopefully, for the pin here that shows the ones that are pinned to it. And what that means is they're always here. If they're pinned, they are always there. A little bit from now, we'll talk about how you can select certain things and pin them here so they're always here as well. So if you have a folder that you often say, I often get to that monthly report folder, I can pin it to this quick access menu. But the things that are there right now, the desktop, downloads, documents, pictures, and music are all certain locations on your computer where you can put stuff. And you can put files and folders. OneDrive would be if you have cloud storage through Microsoft, where you can link your OneDrive, which basically means your cloud storage account, to your desktop, to your computer, so that you can put files in the cloud automatically here. Below that, we'll see this PC. And this PC basically is the stand-in for your computer. So all of the things here, and again, you'll see the repeat of what's in the quick access menu, the desktop, the documents, downloads, music, pictures, those all live on your PC. So they live on your computer, in your computer's hard drive, okay, in the storage part. If we come down a little further, local disk C is going to be your, in the case of our computer, that is where all of our files are stored. And then they can be stored in different folders, like these folders here, okay? If I plug in a different form of media, like a flash drive, the flash drive is gonna show up, and I'm gonna put one in here now, so hopefully you'll see this in real time. So I have plugged in a flash drive now, and what should happen is now I can see this one that says USB drive. That's my flash drive that I just plugged into the computer. So if we're thinking of our filing cabinet at home, we can think of local disk C as our computer, and maybe that's one drawer of that filing cabinet. And the second drawer of that filing cabinet is going to be this flash drive, which is a removable storage device, okay? And that would be, you know, if we had those drawers labeled A, B, C, D in our filing cabinet, drawer D would be the flash drive, drawer C would be the local disk, okay? And these other ones here are specific to my computer here that I'm using right now, where it's stuff that I can get to that other people in our office can get to. So we won't worry about those for now. Okay, any questions about the navigation pane on the side here?
I don't see any questions so far.
Okay, so over here, if you look to the right of the navigation pane, which is the part here that we can use the scroll bar in, this is the navigation pane. Just to the right of that, you can find your frequent folders, which are things that you access a lot of the time. Or if you click on something over here under this PC, like for example, desktop, that should change to the things that live on your desktop, okay? So Then once we click on something, so our 2021 budget folder that we made, I'm going to move this over a little bit. We can now see right here that our 2021 budget folder is on the desktop. We can also see it here in the background because this is the desktop where the blue is. So it's a little bit like the analogy I usually use, is it's a little bit like your post office box, like your mailbox at home, where when someone tries to send you something, they have to have your exact address in order for it to get to you, right? They have to have your street address, your city, your state, and your zip code in order for mail to usually get to you in the most easy way. This thing right here, next to this up arrow, that's right here where it shows the little blue square and then says this PC and desktop. This is known as the file path. And the file path is a lot like your mailing address, where we're saying, okay, we know that this file lives on the desktop. We know that it has to be on our computer, so it has to be on this PC, has to be on the desktop because we put it there, and then we see 2021 budget. If I double click on that, you see how the next step in this process becomes 2021 budget for the file path. Then underneath that, we have the June or May budget. So we know if we're going to use that June budget, and we come to it from File Explorer, we first have to go to desktop. Then we have to go into the 2021 budget to find it. Okay, so the file path is basically like the mailing address for your file. Okay, and the other things you can do with File Explorer, give me just a moment. We can also do the same things we did by right-clicking on the desktop, where we can copy. So if I pick the June budget here, and if you look at the clipboard section up here where it says copy to, I can copy it to another location, or I can copy it to the same location, just like we did here with the desktop. If I right click, I can say copy, and then I can right click again and say paste. And it's going to do the exact same thing it did over here, where it put the June budget with a copy. Okay. Stop me if I'm going too fast for this stuff too. But essentially, with File Explorer, you can manage all of these things about your files and folders. You can move them to new locations. You can copy them to other locations. You can also delete them, and you can rename them. You can also create new folders, just like we did with our desktop. Okay, so these are ways that you can organize and create and move your files and folders, okay, using File Explorer. Okay, now the next thing I want to do within File Explorer.
If I can interrupt, sorry.
Absolutely.
So let me go ahead and read this. It's kind of a longer question, but that's okay.
Okay.
It says, if I wanted the file path available to my successor to update a document, sometimes the file name is written as a footnote on a document. How do I get that file path onto the document?
Yeah, so if you're saying that there's an existing footnote in, say, a Word document that doesn't have the full file path, you can manually go in there and create it once you've found where the folder lives. So, and we're going to talk about search in a few moments, which will also possibly help you if you don't know where that file lives, to then search for it and figure out what the full file path is. So, so for example, let me do the where if, for example, we don't know where it lives, but we know it's somewhere on our computer, which means it has to be somewhere on this PC. This is a good time to cover search. So this PC, we can come over here and there's a little magnifying glass. And magnifying glass pretty much universally means search for something, unless it has a plus or minus in it. If it has a plus or minus in it, that means to zoom in or zoom out. But in this case, since it's just a magnifying glass, it means we can search this PC for a file. So if you at least know the file name, you can search for it. So for example, we knew we had one called June budget. So if I type in June budget, it's going to tell me June budget is here. And if I hit enter, it's going the search results in this PC is going to go ahead and find it for me. And then it should give me a little bit more information about where it's living. Okay, which is something you could do to find the folder if you don't already know where it is, to know that whole file path. So that may help you a little bit too when you're trying to create something for someone else. If you already know where it lives, then you can just edit that the footnote depending on what program that footnote is in. I hope that helps kind of answer the question. And the way I usually express the file path is the same way we just saw it, where you use the little caret, the greater than or less than symbol. Sorry, it's just the greater than symbol, to then say, go to desktop, then this PC, then 2021 budget, then June budget. Okay, so I'm gonna let this finish real quick, and then we'll continue talking about File Explorer. So
we have another question.
Does that answer the question?
I think yes, I think that did answer the question.
Okay.
But we do have another one.
Sure.
Let's see. The question is they want to know how to move a file, and they're saying I'm always moving it on my desktop and then moving it to a folder because I can't see all the folders.
Yes. Okay. We can talk. Yep. We can talk about that in just a second. As soon as this is done. Primarily, the biggest thing with moving, if you use File Explorer and you say, and I'll show you that in just a second, on that Home tab here in File Explorer, you can pick Move To, and then pick your new location that way. And then you don't have to physically do the drag and drop that we were showing on the desktop, because that will take care of it for you, and it can move it to a specific folder. And remember, when you move something, you're not making a copy of it. You are actually moving that file to a new location. If you copy it, you're making a copy that's going to a new place. But when you move it, that's actually moving that. A little bit like if you had a book in the library and you had that book set on one shelf, and you took it off the shelf and you moved it to a new shelf, and then there's no book left in that first location. Okay, that's moving. If you were making a copy, I'd be like, you have one book and you make a copy of it. It's in the same it's in the same location. It's right there on the same shelf with that first one. Okay. So, okay, so here we can see, as we were waiting there for it to catch up, that when we searched in this PC, we did find 2 copies of something that says June budget. We've got the June budget copy and the June budget. If you look over here where it says the C:/user/librarian/desktop, /desktop, when I hover over it, /2021 budget, that is also the file path. Okay, so that would be when you're updating that footnote, that would be the path that you would put there for the next person to find that folder and that file. Okay, I'm gonna go back to this PC. Does that answer the next question too? Did you want to know specifically how to move them from? Yes, we were talking about moving folders. Let me jump back here.
Moving files to folders.
Yes. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and open this, and I'm actually going to move these files out of this folder. And the principle is the same. So I pick up this file. I'm going to hold down my left mouse button, and I'm going to drag it and drop it. And do you see how that little pop-up came up that says move to desktop? And we're like, yes, that's exactly what I want to do. So I'm going to drop it right there, and I've moved it to the desktop. So that takes it out of 2021 budget and moves it to the desktop. June budget here, we're going to move that one over there. And May budget, we're going to move that one over there. Okay. Now, to move those into the 2021 budget, if I open it, you see how now it's empty. This folder is empty. I'm going to take June budget copy, make sure I have it selected, which means I can see the square around it, drag it, and drop it into 2021 budget, like that. If I want to use File Explorer, to do the same thing, I can come down here to File Explorer. I'm going to go find May budget, and we know it lives on the desktop. So we've got May budget here. I can drag it and drop it from within File Explorer like this. Or using my Home tab up here, I can say move to 2021 budget. Okay. So for folks that are less sure of themselves with the dragging and dropping, and there are times where, you go like this and you try to drag it up there and you're like, oops, you actually put it in somewhere else. So if I'm like this and it hasn't selected this one, but it lets me select this one and I accidentally put it in there, that's something that can sometimes happen with the drag and drop method. So if you're a little unsure of that and you want more time to practice with that, your standby is to come up to File Explorer, the Home tab, pick the icon for Move To, and then pick the folder you want to move it to. Okay. If you don't see that folder in this location, in this list, down at the very bottom is the Choose Location, which lets you go through all of the folders and files and things on your computer here. So if you don't automatically see the one you want to move it to in the list, come down here to Choose Location, and then you can browse for where that file folder is that you want to put it in. Okay, so from here, I'm just going to go ahead and pick it up and drag it and drop it and move it to 2021 budget like that. Okay, so there's a couple of different ways you can do it. Hopefully that covered it.
I should also say when you're saving a file, say from the internet, or like maybe you're in Word and you're wanting to save it, it usually lets you pick where you want to save it to. So you can browse your computer for like a location. Maybe you want to save it to your documents folder or something like that. There is an option to save it, not just to the desktop. Because I know for me, I don't always like putting stuff on the desktop because then it just ends up getting cluttered. I like to put it in its location and then I know it's there.
Exactly. So here, what Rebecca's saying is if I go to save this and I go File, Save As, I can hit Browse and then pick a location. So it doesn't have to be the desktop. And in fact, I recommend it isn't the desktop for most documents that you create. So I can save it in the document, this PC documents, and I could save it right here instead. Or I could go into one of these folders, or I can even right click and create a new folder like this. Okay, so now if I have this new folder called Practice, not Practice, you spell it right, for Practice, then I can open this, and now my file path is this PC documents for Practice. The file name is hello, and then I can come down here and I can hit save, and that's going to put this folder, this file, this Microsoft Word file, into that folder. Okay, then I can X out of it. Now, if I want to find that one again, I can go down to File Explorer. I come to this PC, click on it. Now, where did we save it? Does anybody remember where we saved it? Put it in the chat if you want. Or Rebecca can chime in too.
Documents, and then there was another folder in there called
so Documents,
Practice, I think.
And then we put it in for Practice. Yep, and there's our file. Okay. So yes, you absolutely do not have to save everything to the desktop. And in fact, I recommend you don't, because like I said, with my kitties, I want to see those faces. I don't want to have, for me personally, I don't want to have this entirely filled up with icons and folders and files and everything else. And again, for organization, sometimes it's nice to group things together.
And sometimes it's more work if you're saving everything to the desktop. Then you have to go later and then clean it up and make sure everything's right instead of just doing it the first time.
Yep, exactly. So that's why it's kind of nice to pick. It's kind of a good idea to pick an organizational system and run with it for a while, and then see if it actually works for you and if you like it before you then change it to something new. It's good to test it and see if you like it. And we'll talk about a couple of different ones of those in just a moment. I think now is probably, I'm going to finish the little File Explorer tour here, and then we'll take a little break so everybody can kind of get a few moments away from the screen if they want. and then we'll continue. So the other thing I want to show before we take a little break, if you can hang with me for just a second, within File Explorer is the Share and the View tab. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into a folder. Let's go into Documents, for example. And when we're on the home screen, we can see that here's that example where we can pin it to make it part of this list here, that with these pins, and put it into quick access. We can paste, we can copy, we can move. Just an example here. If I want to move something, I do have to select it. So see, if I grab sample document for cloud storage, see how move to is now, it's no longer grayed out. If I don't actually select something, a lot of these are going to be grayed out because I can't do something with it unless I tell the computer which file or folder I want to do something with. Okay, once I've clicked on it, then everything becomes available. Okay, for share, what you can do, you can share your file with someone that also has access to the computer, or you can email it to someone. You can make it a zip file and folder, and we'll talk more about zip files and folders next week when we talk about storage. But what a zip file generally does is it makes a compressed version that's easier to send via email if you have a very large file. If it's got a lot of data in it, you might not be able to send it over email, so you can compress it, which in non-technical terms smooshes it to make it easier to send to someone else. You can burn a disk, you can print, you can fax. You can also password protect files and take away access using these security features here for these files and folders. Okay. Now I'm going to pick a specific folder that I created earlier today called Intro to File Organization to show you some examples of some files. And we're going to talk a little bit about how to view them using File Explorer. Okay. So with File Explorer, there are a couple of different ways you can view things. Right now, what we have here is known as the list view, because if you see, it's a list of different files, the date that they were last modified, meaning last updated, the type of file, and the size of that file. Next week when we talk about storage, but I want to show you that you don't have to leave it in a list view like this. List views can be helpful. It's nice to be able to glance at it and know that, okay, this little icon here means it's an Excel document. It's nice to know the date it was modified. Sometimes that helps you find the most recent version of something. But down here in the bottom right-hand corner, there are two little icons here. And this is displaying information about each item in the window, which means the date modified, the type, the size, all that information. But if you click on the right one, it will show you thumbnails of them. So it's especially useful for pictures. So for example, here, I did say puppies and kitties today. So here's our sleeping kitty, our kitten with flour, our puppy, and our puppy with the dish. Okay, so sometimes the thumbnail view might be a little easier to use when you're dealing, especially with pictures, or with things that have very similar titles, very similar names. Okay, so that is part of view. When I do click on the view tab up here, I can also make it a little easier to see them by making them extra large icons. So hopefully that made everything bigger. If they're small icons, they're kind of tiny. Tiles, large icons, the list, which is just a list, content, which shows me the date that it was taken and the size, the medium icons, or the details. So play around. I encourage you to play around with the view layout here and figure out which of these works best for you. You can also sort by the different categories here, either by picking them from the sort menu or by clicking on the name, the date modified, the type, and the size at the top here. So if I tap on name, it's going to reorder the list from Z to A. If I tap again, it's going to order the list by file name from A to Z, and numbers are going to come first. The only reason this one comes before it is because this is actually a zip file that has been unzipped, and those will come before. But otherwise, you can see the number, and we'll talk more about that too, but you can see the numbers are going to come before the alphabetical letters. Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started again here. I'm going to go back into my PowerPoint and come down to where we are now. So we are going to talk a little bit about how to search for those folders. Now, we just did a demonstration of this. So as everybody's coming back in, we are going to use File Explorer to go ahead and search for a file. So I love File Explorer as a way to search for something if I don't remember all of the information about it. So if I can't remember that long file path to get to it, I can also search for it. And I use this a lot. I do a lot of digital scrapbooking, and sometimes I can't remember what something was named or where it was saved, but I might remember the designer name, or I might be searching for a specific thing like a star, for example. And so I can just put star in the search over here on the far right-hand corner, and it'll bring up anything where the word star appears within those folders or files that I've selected. So I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate this now. So for example, we'll go ahead and open File Explorer. If I wanted to find that May budget, and all I remember was that it had the word May in it, I could do a full computer search by going to this PC. And this is one advantage that computer files have over your actual filing cabinet at home, right? If you had to look for a certain file in your filing cabinet at home, you would actually have to go through and physically try to find it. Here, the computer does the work for you. So if I put in the word May and hit enter, it's going to find a bunch of stuff where the word May appears. Now, sometimes, since the word May, this is great because the word May also means May something. And here's another, there's colleagues who have put other stuff on here too. So let's go ahead and let's change it to June and budget again. Now, if I put space in it, do you see if I put that space, that does make a difference for whether or not it's going to find your file. It also makes a difference if something is misspelled. So if you have a typo in what you're typing in, or a typo in the name of your file, it may not find it because it is running on the idea of an exact search. So if I put June budget in there, it may or may not find it unless I make it without that space. So let's give it a chance to find it by just putting June budget like that. And let's see if it can find it. I'm curious to see if it will. So, and again, you can see here, we are using the search function, and here are up at the top here in the ribbon, you do have some search functions that you can try, like the date it was modified, and other properties and things in here too. You can also save a specific search. If you know you might want to find, run that same search again in the future, you can save it. That's a little bit more advanced. We aren't necessarily covering that in this class specifically, but let's see if it can find it. And again, it's searching your entire computer. So this is one way to do things, but if you have a whole lot of files on that computer, it will take a while. So it's good to know the path and know where you've put stuff, which is why that organizational system that you come up with is going to be really important. But if it's, if it's a last ditch effort of sorts, you can use this. Okay, so it didn't find June budget with a space in it. It wouldn't find it with an underscore either because we made it without those. We just made it June budget. So again, this is another thing where naming conventions will matter because if you've named things in a certain way, it's going to be easier for you to find them this way. So if you know you always name your budget worksheets as, June worksheet, then you can look for June worksheet. For us with the tech workshops, for example, we usually name our PowerPoint handouts. We name it presentation, and then the word, intro to file organization, and then the date. So our construct is usually just call it presentation, then the name of the workshop, and then the date that workshop is happening. Okay, so that's one way to kind of organize your filing system, as it were, so that you can find things a little bit more easily. But that is one way to search for a file or a folder. If you know the folder name, that gets you even closer. So if we remembered that we put it in intro to file organization, that gets us closer. If this has a whole bunch of files in it, again, you can sort by name, or if it's something you touched recently, you can sort by the date modified and try to find it that way. Next week, we'll talk about how sorting things by size can be helpful in knowing what your largest files are that you might want to take off your computer. So we'll talk about that part using size next week. We'll also talk about what the different file types are. But I just wanted you to know that you can do this as a way. And if you don't know the umbrella folder, you can then, like we just did, select this PC and search for it through your entire PC if you have to. You can also, if it's something that you can also use the Windows 10 search down here. So instead of using File Explorer, we can come down here to what's known as the Windows search, which again, you can see the magnifying glass there, and we could search here for it. And we could type in June budget and see that it's a Microsoft Word document. It's also going to tell us the location. So here again is the file path or location and the date it was last modified. And then you could just pick it from here to find it. Okay. But again, in that case, you definitely have to know what it's called. If I type in June, excuse me, sorry. If I type in June, here it's going to get a little closer. So you might, if you don't have the exact name, you might try using the Windows 10 search first because it might get you a little bit closer. Okay. Any questions about searching?
We did have a question. Someone kind of said that her husband suggested not to use spaces when they were naming things. And my response was that it's sort of a personal preference. So with some of my file names and folder names, I do use spaces. So again, it really just depends on your personal preference.
Mm-hmm.
And then she also added, would adding an underscore or something like that to the file name help with searching? And again,
Yes.
it really just depends on the name too. So if you're searching for something with a space in it, it's probably going to search broader, right? Because if it's June space budget, if you search for that, it might pull up more. But if it's June underscore budget, it's going to be a more specific file name, which you might be able to find easier. But again, that's also taking into account that you remember that exact name when you're searching. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And one of the reasons that folks didn't use spaces a long time ago was because the computers could actually not read them. So I wouldn't be able to put intro to file organization like this with the 2 spaces. I would have to put intro to file organization with no spaces or the underscores. And that was because previous versions of computers had trouble with spaces being put into file names. That is less of an issue now because more of the operating systems like Windows OSs and Mac OSs can actually identify the spaces and can kind of resolve them. But that is one reason why a lot of times people will say, yeah, we don't want to use spaces. And then the example of the underscore is something where a lot of folks, that was a way around it. So that instead of this looking, it's a lot harder to read it if it's, it doesn't have the spaces in it and it's intro to, file organization like that. It's harder to read. So yeah, putting in the underscores, so that it looks like this, file organization like that, makes it a little easier to read. for somebody. But again, as Rebecca says, it is your choice. So you can see, for example, what it says right here, file the EX underscore files underscore acoustic underscore guitar. That's pretty easy for me to read. But it does, you know, that is, it's no, spaces are no longer one of the things that you cannot do. You can do them now, but there are still folks that prefer to use the underscores. And I do that. I use the underscore a lot when I'm adding dates on the end of something. So if I, you know, was to rename this and I was going to add today's date, I would do it usually with the period at the end for a date and do it like this. But again, that's just my personal preference of how I structure things. That's not something you have to do. But yeah, it's a great point about spaces and whether or not, you know, you want them in there or not. So yeah, it goes back to I think all the way back to command line, where people would have to type something in specifically without having graphics on the computers. But don't quote me on that. I will have to look that up, and I'll put that in the follow-up email as a little bit of history.
I was going to say, you'd probably be surprised that a lot of the stuff that follows through to computers nowadays is probably like, you can do it a million different ways, but it's just a small detail that someone might not know has changed.
Right. Yeah. So don't quote me on that, but I'll look up the history on that and I'll put it in the follow-up email because it's kind of a fascinating story. So, okay. Other questions about searching or access? That's an excellent point about spaces.
I don't see anything so far. And
Okay.
someone also, actually, hold on. Someone says, you said something on the ribbon said quick access.
Yes. So File Explorer, and we're going to cover this a little bit more in more detail actually in just a second with quick access menu. But within the File Explorer, the quick access section, excuse me, that's hard to say fast, includes things that have been pinned so that they appear up here at the top, which means they will always show up there if they've been pinned. Quick access down here, these would change based on what you've recently opened. So if I had a bunch of other folders over here, for example, this is a folder and I opened that one a couple of times and then I went back into here. If I'd opened it a couple of different times, it would show up down here. And note that these do not have the pin because I haven't selected to pin them. And I will show you how to do that in just a second, how to pin something to this quick access area. Okay. Does that cover what you were talking about with quick access? Before I move on?
I believe so.
Okay. If not, again, feel free to clarify in the chat and we'll keep answering it. Excuse me. I'm gonna take a quick break here and then we will move into the other section. I'm just okay. A lot of talking. Okay. So the next thing I want to talk about, now that we've covered File Explorer and coming back to the quick access menu, is the recycle bin.
Someone, hold on, sorry. Someone
Sure.
said that they saw something that said easy access. Is there a difference between quick access and easy access?
Do they happen to remember where they saw it?
They just said they saw something that said easy access.
Was it in the?
I don't think I'm familiar with anything. It says ribbon top middle. Oh, there it is. It's in the ribbon there. It says easy access in the new group.
Oh, yes, up here. Yeah. So this is going to be something that's a little bit more advanced, where and we'll do a little bit of research about this and we'll put it in the follow-up email. I'm not as familiar with this particular function because I have not used it before. I don't think you have either, right, Rebecca?
No, I've never used it before.
Okay. And judging from what I'm seeing here, the always available offline and syncing and working offline would suggest to me that it works for OneDrive, where you have something that's in the cloud, but you want it to be available when you don't always have internet access. But that's just a guess. And so again, this is something we'll look up because I am not totally sure what
that
the easy access part is here. Too. So, but usually something where it says work offline means that you don't have internet access, but you still want to be able to access the file. So I'm guessing it's dealing with integration of OneDrive. So, but that's a great question, and we will put that in the follow-up email.
Thank you,
Okay.
Susan.
Thank you. I love it when I get questions about stuff. Yay! Especially things that I haven't played with, because I love exploring and discovering new things on the computers as well. So, all right. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to recycle. If we don't have other questions about that.
No, we're good.
Okay. So the recycle bin is very much like the trash bin might be in your office or your home, where if you've written something on a piece of paper and you don't want it anymore and you don't like it, and you crumple it up and you throw it in the trash. So when you delete a file from your computer, so if I go into 2021 budget here and I say, all right, I don't need the June budget copy because I've already got the June budget, I'm going to go ahead and right click and say delete from here, or I can hit on the ribbon, I can hit delete from here. It's going to do the same thing, and it's going to delete it from this folder. Now the caveat here is it's deleted it from the folder, but it hasn't deleted it from the computer. Because one of the nice things is it wants you to have a chance to rescue that file in case you didn't actually mean to delete it. So what happens is when I hit that, it actually goes to what's known as the recycle bin. And the recycle bin, as it says there, contains the files and folders that you have deleted. Okay, so it gives you the chance, in case I didn't mean to delete that file, I can open the recycle bin either by double clicking or right click and say open, and I will get the recycle bin. So here are a bunch of things that we've deleted off the computer recently that are now in the recycle bin. If I want them all gone, I can hit empty the recycle bin, and that's basically the same as you saying, all right, I'm taking my trash out, putting it at the curb, and then someone's going to pick it up and take it away. Okay, and then you don't have access to it anymore. If you didn't mean to put that thing into the recycle bin, you can select it, and the option to restore the selected items will be enabled, and you can hit restore the selected items. What that will do is go ahead and restore it. So I'm going to go back to File Explorer, back to 2021 budget, and you'll see that it's been restored. So that file is now back in my folder here. Okay, if I don't want it, if I don't want to use delete or right click and say delete, I can also drag it and drop it to the recycle bin and let go. And that'll, again, put it in the recycle bin. Okay, so those folders and files that are on or are in your recycle bin will stay in your recycle bin until you empty the recycle bin. And you can see that they are still taking up space on your computer. So if I look at this right now, it says I have 14 items. If I pick the June budget copy, down here at the very bottom, you can see it says 1 item selected, and it's 11 kilobytes. If I select all of this stuff, though, it will add up. So you do occasionally want to go in and empty your recycle bin, especially if you need more space. And again, we will talk about that more next week when we cover storage and space. Okay, but I did want you to get a little preview of the recycle bin today. Questions about the recycle bin?
I don't see any so far.
Okay, the next thing I want to cover is those frequently accessed files and folders. So things that you access a lot, you can definitely put them on the desktop here if you want, especially if if you go into the same folder every day and are doing something with the same files, it's probably a good idea to have that on the desktop. So it's really easy to get to. You can also pin a folder to the start menu, or you can pin it to that quick access menu. Excuse me. So I'm going to show that in just a moment by picking, let's pick one that's not. So I'm going to move this one so that it's no longer on the desktop. And I'm going to put it, let's put it in documents. Okay. Okay, so I'm moving this folder. So it's now, when I go back into, and did you see how, everybody see how I did that? Where I just grabbed it and moved it like that. And now it's in documents. So 1 second. So now when I go into File Explorer, and I'm going to come down here to this PC, and I check desktop. Let's see, that should, I thought we just moved it. Let me move it again, move to documents. Cancel. Okay. All right. So it's there. So what I can do is let's go ahead and say that I want to pin this to the start menu. I can right click on it and I can pick pin to start. When I hit pin to start, that means when I go to the start menu over here, it's going to be picked along with these charms here, right here. So you see intro to file organization from 518. It is now on the start menu. So all I have to do to get to that one, if it's not here, just come over here and tap on it there, and I get into it. Okay. So that might be one way you take a frequently accessed file or folder and put it, it's essentially creating a quicker way to get to it, right? It's one click instead of 3 or 4 clicks to follow that whole file path using File Explorer. So that is one way to do it. You can also, like we said, if I go into File Explorer, I can pin things to this quick access menu. So if I wanted to pin intro to file organization here, I can right click on it and I can say pin to quick access. Does everybody see that closer to the top there? If I pin it to quick access, that means it's always going to be here, not just because I've opened it today, but because I've pinned it. Okay. Questions about those two forms of frequently accessed files?
Can you show the pinning again? Pin to start?
Yep, I was just gonna unpin here from quick access, and I will unpin from start, and then I'll show you how to undo it too. So, okay, so we're gonna go into File Explorer here, intro to file organization. I'm gonna right click on it, and I'm gonna say pin to start, which is in that second category, the second, or actually it's the third, I guess the third one here, and say pin to start. Okay, if I close out of File Explorer, come down to the start menu, and then I'll find it right here at the bottom of my list of charms here. I can also, it should be, I think it's just over there. It's not, it doesn't put it in the list because this list is your program list. So it's not going to appear on the left-hand side with the programs, but it is going to appear on the right-hand side with the icons. Okay. And then I could get into it like that. Okay. To unpin something, say you've had your 2021 budget here for the whole year, it's now 2022, you no longer need your 2021 budget here, you would right click on it and say unpin from start. Okay. For the pinning to quick access, which means you're jumping into File Explorer and you go through File Explorer a lot to find stuff, and you know you want something here that you can get to easily, you can also right click and say pin to quick access. That puts it up here in this list and it stays in that list until you right click again and say unpin from quick access. Okay. Questions about quick access and frequently accessed? And again, these are all in that hand. Sorry, Rebecca.
I said, I think we're good.
Okay, these are all these instructions, the right click, pin to, right click, pin to, those are in that handout. So you will have access to those with screenshots. And okay, so now we're gonna go ahead and get into a little bit more theoretical with our suggestions. So I'm gonna come down here a little bit, and they're not just our suggestions, but I took these, the suggestion parts I took from other folks. But this is when we're talking about, you know, what way would you like to organize your files and folders? There's the technical side, which we've kind of covered now, and then there's sort of the theoretical side of how would you like to do it? So to me, I kind of think of my computer a bit like a closet. And if I'm going to have an organized closet, I think about the way that I group things together. So if I group all of my dress shirts together and I group them long sleeve, then short sleeve, and then by color or by size or style, and then if I haven't worn something in a long time, I usually will put it on the very far side on a lower bar, so that then I know I haven't worn this in a long time. Maybe I should go ahead and donate it somewhere, or remove it and give it to a friend. Or if I buy something because I think it looks really cool and I've only worn it once or twice, I'll set it aside because maybe that's something I want to consider giving to somebody else. There's also dresses and things that I wear for special occasions that I still know I need them for when those special occasions happen, but they're not in my primary everyday closet clothing collection, right? So those are going to be kind of in a separate area of my closet. So I think of files in the same way. The files on my computer, I group budget, right? I'm going to group all of my budget related stuff in a folder for the budget, just like I would do all the dress shirts in a group for dress shirts. Do I organize them by date? Maybe. Do I organize them by what I've already done or what I need to still do or still work on? Maybe. That is all going to be stuff that's up to you. So for me, I also think about things like shoes. Are my shoes in the closet? Are they all in one area of the closet? Do they have a shoe rack? That would be like putting them in a folder. And then again, grouped by color, style, or both. So it's really just classifying things by what makes the most sense to you for where you put them, and then naming them the way you want to name them. Okay, so here again, as Rebecca said earlier, this is unique to you. There's no right way or wrong way to do it. You can make small tweaks to your system, or you can do big moves to a whole new system if you want. And if you already like what you've got, you don't need to change it. Or maybe you just make those small tweaks. Okay. So things to consider. What is your structure? What's going to work for you? Is it easier for you to organize your files by the date that something happened, or the subject, or the type of file? Maybe you're going to put all your Microsoft Word documents together in one folder that's just labeled documents, like you already have on the computer as one of the defaults. Or you can also arrange things if you use your personal computer and you have your work computer. Maybe you have a certain construct that you follow at work due to the nature of your office or how they label things, and you want to carry that over to your personal. Or maybe you have what you use for your personal system of filing and organization, and you prefer that, but you have something you have to do at work, and that's fine. You also might have things grouped on your personal computer that you also use for work, and so you might separate them out into what's personal and what's professional. Totally up to you. Some things happen automatically. You may have noticed that with a lot of smartphones these days, your photos are automatically organized by Apple or Google, and it organizes them by date. And then sometimes they were trying to do things where they would identify whether or not there was an animal in it, and you could do tags like this has puppies, this has cats, this has houses, buildings, whatever. So some of it you don't have a lot of control over with those programs that automatically do it that way. All right. I do have some best practices. These are tips that I've pulled from other locations and also some of my own thoughts. And again, suggestions. So feel free to take them, use them if you like, try them out if you like. If you don't like them, find you don't need them, throw it out the window and go back to what you like, or try something different. Okay. So I personally don't like everything being on my desktop. I like to have the opportunity, as I said, to see my cat's faces. So I will group things in folders. I will move folders off of the desktop and put them in documents or other places so that they don't all live there. Some things I use regularly, I do put on the desktop in a folder. That is true. Okay, this is something I saw online that a couple of people had suggested that are professional organizers. Suggested you create an inbox folder on the desktop with files that you need to sort and place them. And then at the end of the week, you go through and take all those files that you've generated and then you organize them, sort of like you would if you had a physical inbox on your desk and you just went through things throughout the week and then placed them where they needed to go. I recommend checking your downloads folder. Rebecca mentioned this earlier too. Most of the things that you download from the internet, be it a photo that comes through an email or something else that you download, they do go into a specific folder called the downloads folder, unless you've changed that location. So it's good to check that downloads folder. And if you need a little reminder of where it lives, if I go to File Explorer, I'm looking here, the downloads folder, is this one with the big blue arrow that goes down. Those are things that you're going to have downloaded from the internet, okay? And they all go in there unless you've picked a different spot for them. So you do want to check that downloads folder occasionally, see what you've gotten. You know, if you've downloaded a bunch of pictures from a relative, maybe you then want to put them, instead of having them hang out in downloads, you want to put them into a pictures folder so that then you can find them later. Okay, so that's something to consider. Using naming convention that works for you. Again, if you want to use date, subject, whatever other classifications you want to use, like for us, presentation in front of all the presentations. You can even see that up here where it says presentation and then the name and then the season that we're teaching it, okay, up here at the top. So that's how we structure those things. You can structure them however you want. This is one of my favorites. Abbreviations only work if you'll always remember what they mean. So if you shorten something, you know, say you just said budge instead of budget, and then you come back 10 years later and you're like, why did I name something Bud? You know, what does that mean? And then I tried to make that into an abbreviation. So it looks like this. So just keep that in mind. Descriptive is better, too descriptive isn't. So remember, you only have a certain number of characters that will actually show on your screen before it cuts off. So keep that in mind. Utilize the search to find stuff if you need to. Trying not to overnest folders and files. And overnest, so nesting is what happens when you have a folder like documents, and then you have a folder like this, and then you go into this folder, and then you have more folders, and maybe I say, you know, this folder, and this folder leads to that folder, et cetera, where you end up having so many folders in this file path that you just are constantly having to open and click to get to it. Okay, so that's called nesting. And over nesting, general rule of thought is, you know, like maybe 4 tops that you go in, you have to click 4 times, and then that's enough. Otherwise, you might have to look at, you know, whether or not you can pull that folder and call it something else and bring it higher in your hierarchy of your folders. Okay, so. And 4 is kind of a random generated. If for you it's better to have 6, then go ahead and have 6. It's up to you. But just keep in mind about how many times you have to click into something. Okay. And then most importantly, which will lead into next week's discussion, is make sure you schedule some time to clean up and back up your computer. So cleaning up means go to look at your desktop, look at all the stuff that's there. How many of those things do you access on a regular basis? If you access all of it on a regular basis, it can all stay, or maybe you consider pinning it to the start menu or pinning it to quick access so that you can get to them more easily than just having them all on the desktop. And then backing up, we're going to talk about that more next week. Okay. And then I do have couple of additional resources at the end of the list. These are from some folks that will talk about how to organize computers. and computer files. And then there's a File Explorer tutorial in there. And then Digital Learn has a nice tutorial about dragging and dropping and moving files and copying files and folders. Okay. Any questions about the kind of the theoretical side of organization? Oh, I guess I should do it this way too.
I don't see any questions so far, but if you need to raise your hand and talk your question out loud, that's okay too.
Yes, we can absolutely take questions. And then just to let you know, so next week is the digital file storage. You're all welcome to attend that one too. It is kind of a two-part workshop now that we've expanded it out. And in June, we will focus on our tablets and smartphones. So we will have iPhones and iPads. Rebecca will be teaching that one for us. Then Android phones and tablets, and a class for Kindles. And then we'll talk at the end of the month, the last 2 weeks, we'll talk about library resources that you can get from the Champaign Public Library or possibly your local library if you're not if you're not a member of the Champaign Public Library. Okay. And then as always, here's my email address if you'd like to reach out to me specifically. Again, we have the Book a Librarian program. We're always happy to answer any questions at the desk. And you can always call us, and you can also schedule those one-on-one consultations or reach out to us via chat and email. Okay, so I'll go ahead and stop sharing now. Hopefully that will come back, and then I'll come back in and start my video. Okay, so that's my hair there a little bit. Alrighty, any other questions? We can answer. I know it was a lot of information today. As I said, we've expanded these two out because trying to cover all of this in an hour was a little difficult from the start to begin with. So that's why we split them out, and we thought we should go ahead and add just a little bit more in there to give you a little bit more to work with, like a tour of File Explorer and what you can do with it. So.
Yeah, and we'll send out the email with the handout as well. And that will have some of the questions more in depth of, some of the stuff we answered today, as well as a little feedback form. And we really take those feedback forms seriously, especially if you're interested in a class that we may not be teaching and you're suggesting something that we teach, or
absolutely,
just general feedback really helps us.
Yeah. And whenever we try something new, like the 5-minute break, I'm definitely interested in feedback on whether that you thought that was a good thing. If you liked that you could stay and kind of look at something that wasn't tech related during those 5 minutes, or if that just wasn't of interest to anybody, and that will help us determine if we continue to do it or not.
Yes, and that will go out with the email when the recording is ready.
Yeah.
Okay, well, unless anybody has any other questions, we will see you next week.
Yeah. And again, feel free to rewatch. Once we send out that YouTube video, feel free to rewatch. And you can always practice at the same time and run the YouTube webinar on one side and try to follow, what we're doing with clicks and things, and create your own folders and move them back and forth like we did today in the demos too. Sometimes that's a helpful way to kind of extrapolate or expand on what you've learned today.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a good afternoon.